Simon Says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
Welcome back to QuickBooks for Desktop 2023. This is Cindy again. We have just wrapped up Section 4 where we talked all about customers. Now we want to get started with Section 5 where we're going to talk about how vendors work in QuickBooks. Vendors are people or businesses that you buy from. You'll need to know how to set up the vendor list the correct way, how to enter bills, how to pay bills, and also how to work with vendor credits. Let's go ahead and start though in this first video and talk about getting all those vendors set up. I'll show you how to start working with vendors. When you're looking at your home screen, you'll see an option right at the top that says vendors. You can also access the vendor center from this icon, or if you went through the menu, vendors, vendor center. All three would take you to the screen here. You'll notice this is set up very similar to the way that the Customer Center was set up. You have a list of all your vendors on the left-hand side, and they're in alphabetical order. You also see the balance that you owe that vendor, and this would come from any bills that you've entered in QuickBooks but haven't yet paid. There's also a column for attachments if you had added an attachment to that vendor. Notice I'm looking at the active vendors right now. If I click the down arrow, I have some other choices. I want to point out the All Vendors option because what this does is opens up this area on the left. If you have a vendor that you want to make inactive, just click the space to the left of that vendor and that will put an X there indicating it's now inactive. And what that means is that when you're anywhere else in QuickBooks and you pull down a list of vendors, this one will not show up. However, you can activate it again by clicking the X. I'm going to go back and show just the active vendors. The next thing you'll notice is that the vendor you have selected, you'll see their vendor information here on the right. There's also a map and some directions, just like we saw with customers. This will take you to Google Maps and give you directions to this address here. You can add an attachment right here at the top. If you have a file that's already in your computer, you can go ahead and attach that from here by choosing Computer. You can also pull in any attachments from your mobile or the Document Center, or you can actually just drag and drop if you had a bill, for example, in Outlook. You can drag it right into this area here and then click Done and that will attach it. If you wanted to edit any of this vendor information, just click this little Edit button right here, and then you can go in and fill out any of this information. There are some reports over on the right. There's a quick report you can run for this vendor, and there's also one for the open balance, meaning anything that you still owe that vendor. There's options here as well for ordering 1099 forms and checks if you'd like to get them from Intuit, but you do not have to buy them from Intuit. You can buy them anywhere you like. Down here at the bottom, you're going to see transactions. These are all of the transactions for that vendor. If you wanted to go to one of these, just double click and open it up, and then you'll see that transaction. If you wanted to make a change to it, just go ahead and do that and save and close at the bottom. You've got your Contacts tab. This would be your contact person, or if you have multiple people at that organization, you can go ahead and add that. You'll just go down to Manage Contacts and add a new one at the bottom, just like we did with the customers. Here's your to-do list. If you have any items that you have to take care of related to this particular vendor, you can go ahead and click on Manage To-Dos. There's an arrow to the right, and you can create a new to-do. And that way you'll know what types of things you have to take care of. You can also run some reports. The next tab over is your Notes tab. All you have to do is come down to the arrow next to Manage Notes and add a new note. Also, if you had sent emails through QuickBooks, then you'll see those listed here. And the last tab says Items. This is where if you have particular items that you maybe order or maybe services you provide, things like that, you can have all those things listed here and you can see the information that you can keep about that particular vendor. Let's go back up to the top and look at how to set up a new vendor. The first thing you'll notice is there's an option that says New Vendor. We'll choose Add New Vendor, but I want to show you that you can also add multiple vendors. The first thing you want to do is add the vendor name. We'll say ABC Plumbing. There is a place to put the opening balance. This is the amount of money that you owe the vendor as of the start date of your company file. You typically don't want to put that in because you won't have a list of all the bills that you still owe the vendor. It's better to go enter those bills separately. Just don't enter them both because you'll end up having an opening balance and those bills, and that will double what you owe the vendor. We're on the address info here, and you can see all the fields that you can fill in. You can put in the company name. You can put in the actual person's name if you're buying from an individual. You can see all these fields having to do with emails, website, phone numbers. If you filled in address information, it would populate right down here. The next tab over is the payment settings. If your vendor gives you an account number, you can go ahead and put that in here just to keep track of it. And if you have particular terms with that vendor, you can set that up here as well. If you're going to be sending checks to your vendor, you can put in how that vendor wants their name printed on the check. You can also put in a credit limit if your vendor's giving you one. There's also a billing rate level option, and what this has to do with is if you actually buy services from a vendor, it might be that sometimes that service is an hourly rate, and sometimes it's a custom rate you've set for a particular item that you're working on with that vendor. The next tab over on the left is your tax settings, and this is a really important tab that I want you to make note of because if you have subcontractors that work for your business and you need to send them a 1099, this is where QuickBooks is going to know which vendor gets a 1099. You're going to have to put in the vendor tax ID number and check the box they're eligible for that 1099. That's very important because if you don't do that, it will not pull that vendor when it pulls 1099 reports. The next one is your account settings. If you want to enter bills or checks, for example, in QuickBooks, and you want it to pre-populate with one or more of these accounts from your chart of accounts, then you can set that up here to have it automatically pull those in. If you don't do that, what's going to happen is it's going to pull in the last account that was used when you wrote a check or when you created a bill. The last tab on the left says additional info. If you wanted to have different types of vendors, you could set them up here. You can also set your custom fields over here by choosing Define Fields and then making sure the ones you want to show up for vendors are checked, or if you had a new one, you could type it on this next line. Once you're finished, go ahead and click OK, and that's how you're going to set up vendors in QuickBooks. Let's go ahead now and move over to the second video in section 5, and I want to show you how to get started entering bills in QuickBooks. Hey there, it's Cindy again. Welcome back to QuickBooks for Desktop 2023. We're working in section 5. We're talking about vendors. This is really the accounts payable section. We've already talked about how to enter a vendor, and now that we have one set up, I want to show you how to go through and enter bills. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks and we'll get started. QuickBooks has an icon right here for entering bills. You want to make sure that you enter all of your bills in QuickBooks so that you can run reports to see who you owe, how much you owe, if there's anything that's overdue, those types of things. I would even go ahead and enter any automatic payments coming up. If you have a car payment, for example, that's automatically deducted, go ahead and enter that here so that when you run your report, you have a full overview of what you still owe. There are a lot of people that don't enter the bills, they just pay them. Your accounting is correct if you do that, but you won't be able to run any accounts payable reports to see exactly where you stand. It's highly suggested that you enter bills and then go over here and pay bills. Let's go ahead and enter a loan payment. The first thing I want to point out is the fact that bill is automatically selected. Sometimes you might get a credit from your vendor. If you're entering that credit memo, go ahead and choose credit here. QuickBooks wants to know who your vendor is. You can pick it from this list, or at the very top of this list is an option to add a new vendor if they're not already here. You'll see it populated the address for me. And if there were any terms already set up in the vendor setup, then you would see them listed here. If not, you need to choose your terms from this list. I'll pick net 30. You'll notice there is a field now that appeared for the discount date, and I can't type in there, and that's because that field's only available to use if you pick one of these top two options or create one similar to this. In case you don't know what this means, 1% 10 net 30 means that your bill is due in 30 days, but if you paid in 10, you can take 1% off of the total of that bill. If you choose that option, you'll notice now you can change the date over here for your discount date. I'm going to go ahead and put mine back on net 30. There's also a place for a memo here. If you wanted to say something like monthly payment, you could go ahead and put that information here. The next thing you'll see at the top right is the date of your bill. Then you have a place for a reference number. Usually if you receive a bill from your vendor, it will have what they call an invoice number on their side. On your side, they call it a reference number. You want to make sure you plug that in so that when you're actually printing checks or paying this bill, that reference number will pull so they know how to match it on their side. When you have a loan, it's usually going to be your loan number instead of a reference number. The next thing you want to do is go ahead and put in the amount of that payment. And if you're using the class feature, then you want to pick the class that this goes to. If it doesn't go to one, then you can just leave that blank. When you're looking at your expenses tab down here at the bottom, you're going to want to put in the amount of the loan that's principal and the amount that's interest. When you're looking at your chart of accounts, you want to go ahead and look for your loan in the other current or the long-term liability list, whichever one applies. The next account down is going to be interest expense. If you don't have interest expense set up, you can see this is a great way to do it. You will have finance charges. That's more related to credit card charges. And then there's loan interest, which is what you would choose here. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have the correct amount next to each one of these that applies. And if you don't know the amount of that loan interest or the amount of the principal, you could just put 500 next to the loan and then come back and change that later. Here's a neat little calculator trick in QuickBooks. If you don't know at this point how much the interest should be, what you can do is right there in that amount field, I'm going to type 500, and on my keyboard, I'm going to say minus $356.98 and then hit the enter key, and now it's given me the amount of my interest. Make sure if these apply to a customer or job that you fill in the information over in this column. If it's going to be billable, you'll fill this in. And what this means is if you intend to turn around and have your customer reimburse you, you want to pull it onto an invoice, then make sure it's checked under the billable column. And then the last column is the class column. Over on the right-hand side, what you see is any information about that vendor and some recent transactions. If you want to hide that area, just hide the history with this arrow, and that way you can see the full screen. Now that this is set up, I'm going to save and close. You'll notice in this case, I changed the terms for my vendor. It's asking if I want to change them permanently in the vendor's record. I'll go ahead and say yes. And now that bill will be saved. It is now part of accounts payable. If I go back to my vendor center, which I still have open on the left over here, and I click on that vendor, you'll see that bill show up when you're looking at the transactions tab, and you can see it right down here at the bottom. I'm going to double click and open that back up because there's a few more things that I want to point out to you. I want to point out some of these options. Most of these you'll be familiar with already, but there are a few that you haven't seen yet. You're already familiar with your Find feature. Here you can search left or right to look for any bills that you just can't find. Here's an option to create a new bill. This will save the one you're currently on and put you on a new blank bill. Here you can save that bill. You can also delete it if you want right here. Sometimes people choose to void them instead of delete them. That's an option. You can create a copy. You can also memorize this. Here's an option to print your bill if you wanted to do that. You could also attach a file. If you actually used a purchase order to create this bill, which we did not, we're going to talk about purchase orders coming up in section 6. But if you did, you could select your purchase order from the list. You could also enter any time that might be related to working on setting up this bill. Clear splits basically means that it would clear both of these out and you could enter these again. Here's a recalculate option. And here you can upload and review bills, and we're going to be working on that in the third video. You could also pay your bill from here. Chances are you won't be on this screen when you're ready to pay the bill, but you could. These last three here, calculate landed costs, intercompany transactions, and scan barcodes, you won't have if you don't have the Enterprise Edition. Back under reports, there's some reports you can run. You'll see a lot of them related to vendors. Here's an item listing. If you wanted to look at any open purchase orders, you could. Vendor balance detail report. There's unpaid bills and purchases by vendor. The last option is a search, which is a newer feature in the 2023 version. And this allows you to search through this bill if you're looking for something in particular. Notice you can search up or down by using these arrows or type something in this field and then hit search. That's all there is to actually entering bills in QuickBooks. Let's go ahead and hit save and close at the bottom, and that bill is now entered. And we can move on now to video number 3, where I can show you how to upload and review bills in QuickBooks. Hey there, welcome back to QuickBooks for Desktop 2023. It is Cindy again. We're in section 5 and we're talking about vendors, or really anything related to accounts payable in this section. We're down to video number 3, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how to upload and review your bills and your receipts. These would be receipts that you took through the mobile app, or bills that possibly were emailed to you and you want QuickBooks to automatically put those in. Or maybe you've already written a check to pay that bill and you want to attach the two. There's several different things you're going to be able to do. We're going to head over to QuickBooks and I'll show you how to take care of uploading and reviewing bills and receipts. Any bills that you've already uploaded will show up down here at the bottom like this. The way this list is populated is either by you having a file already created on your computer and you browse to upload it, or by using your mobile phone to snap a picture. Let's go back to browse to upload. There are a couple things you need to know here. This could be a bill or receipt that was emailed to you. Maybe you scanned it in. It really doesn't matter as long as it's a file that you can get to. You want to make sure it's saved as a PDF file, a JPEG file, or .png, one of those. And then it will populate right down here with these others. The other way that you can have your receipts or bills show up here is to use your mobile phone. What you want to do is make sure you have the QuickBooks Desktop app. Once you set it up, it's going to ask you which company file you want to associate it with. You'll just go down the list and you'll find this file name right here, and then that's how it makes the connection. The other thing is, how does that photo that you've taken get over here? What would happen is you're going to click right over here and you're going to set this up. Now this one's already been set up. What will happen is for the very first time, you will decide whatever you want to be in front of the @qbdesktopdocs.com. Then you'll click OK and it will be set up so that the next time you snap with your mobile phone and take a picture, it will know to email it to this company and to this email address. All you have to do to access this email address is upload from Google Drive. You would click here, you would log into your Intuit account, and then you would actually see these show up there, and you'd check them off and then they'd show up in this window. And that's exactly how one of these got here. This Johnny's Moving was done that way. The PSM Marketing, I went to browse to upload and brought that in. One little thing that happens in here that's kind of quirky is sometimes you will upload a file and it doesn't show up. You'll need to wait a few minutes, or you can get out and come back in, and a lot of times it will already be there. There's also a sync option right here. You can always sync to make sure you've grabbed everything that you want to upload. There's also a couple of options where this gear is located. These are just the different columns of information, and if there's a column you want to see, go ahead and check it off, and now you'll see I just clicked on memo and there it is right there. When you see these transactions show up at the bottom here, these are not over in QuickBooks yet. They're in this holding place right here. And if it sees an exact match, it will tell you, like this one here. This is a bill from PSM Marketing. It's looking at the amount, it's looking at the vendor name, the date, and if it sees an exact match, it's going to tell you that. That way it doesn't enter this one twice. I had already entered this one manually in QuickBooks. What I can do with this one is come over to Select, and if I want to, I can review it, delete it, or move it to the receipts. I'll move it to the receipts. It will ask me if I'm sure I want to do this. I'm going to say yes, and that is now done. This one here, Johnny's Moving Company, there was no match for this one. This is just one that I snapped with my phone and brought in. Over here where it says Select, I can import this data. Here you'll see the actual bill. It's reading all the information that was on this bill right over here. You want to double check it and make sure everything looks good. You'll notice it didn't put in a reference number and it doesn't have Johnny's Moving Company in the vendor list yet. I'll go ahead and quick add that. You'll want to look for the reference number. Make sure everything else looks okay. You want to pick the account. Sometimes it knows where to put these, other times it doesn't. This one here would be an office expense. And we're done. Go ahead and save and close. And now that bill is in QuickBooks. You can always refresh this window, or if you wanted to move this over to the receipts, you can do that. And that just means you're going to have a place where you can go and just see the actual receipt. The other thing I just want to mention is you might have more than one user that you want to be able to have an email address to send this over with. I'll go ahead and click on Manage Users. And what you can do is if you have another user you want to give access to, come down here to Give Access and you can walk through the wizard. That's really all you need to do to upload and review your bills. Let's go ahead and head over now to video number 4, and we'll talk about once those bills are uploaded, how do you go through and pay those bills? Paying bills is easy in QuickBooks. Hey, it's Cindy again. Welcome back to QuickBooks for Desktop 2023. Once you have entered your bills and you're ready to make a payment, all you have to do is really go in and check off those payments, and there's a few other things that I want to show you when paying bills. Let's head over to QuickBooks and I'll show you how to get started. Probably the easiest way to access the Pay Bills option is from the home screen. You'll see after you enter bills, you can pay bills. Let me show you a couple of other places that the Pay Bills option is located in case you happen to be in a different window. I'll go back up here to the Vendor Center. And in the Vendor Center, what you're going to see is up here where it says New Transactions. Here's one of the options to pay your bills. That's one way. Another way is if you happen to be on the home screen and you happen to be in the bill you'd like to pay, meaning you'd have to search for that bill, but in that bill, you have an option to pay the bill right here. So it really just depends on where you happen to be clicked, how you want to access that bill pay option. I'll go back to the home screen, and after Enter Bills, I'm coming across to the Pay Bills option. This is a list of all the bills that you owe, even if you owe a penny. There are different ways to sort this list. You'll notice currently I'm showing all the bills, but I could look at only the ones due before a specific date if I wanted to. I could also filter this list. If I just want to see the bills for a particular vendor, let's say Cal Gas and Electric, you can see now that we only owe Cal Gas and Electric one payment. The other thing is, if you're looking at all of your vendors, you can sort this list. You probably do want to leave it sorted by vendor because then all of CU Electric is together, for example. But you could also look at this by the amount that's due. If there's an amount to pay, you could sort it that way. There's just different ways to sort this list. What you want to do is go down the list and check off any of the bills that you want to pay. I've checked off both of these CU Electric bills, and I'm going all the way over to the right because this is the amount to pay. It's going to assume you want to pay all of the bill unless you change this. Let's say that instead of $500, I'm going to pay $455. QuickBooks will remember that balance so that when I'm ready to pay that balance, it will be reflected in this window. One of the things that you can't do in this window is you can't double click any of these to go to that transaction. If you want to go to a transaction, make sure you're clicked on it, and then you'll notice down here on the left it says go to bill. That's how you're going to get to that bill. There's also an option for setting the discount. If you know that you're going to get a discount on this particular bill, maybe you had terms of 2% 10 net 30, you could actually click on set discount. You could change that discount amount, and also you could create an account to put that to. If you have any credits available, you would click right here and you would see them listed. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have the correct payment date and the method in which you're going to pay this. Because check is selected, the options over here to be printed and assigned check number are available. That means that if you're going to print checks, you can wait until you've gone through and paid all of these and print them all at the same time. If you know you just have one, you can assign the check number. If I change the method to credit card, you'll see I don't have those options, but it does list my credit card accounts over here. I'll go back to check. I'm going to say assign check number, and I want to make sure that I'm taking this out of my checking account, and notice it gives you the ending balance. Now I'm going to click on Pay Selected Bills. What you'll notice here is that there is a field for the check number. This is where you can add the correct check number, or if you were paying it with a debit card, you might put the word debit in there. Anything you want as far as your little coding there to know how you paid this bill. I'll just go ahead and put in a check number, and I'm going to click OK. And that check is now in my register. You do get a window that pops up asking you if you want to pay more bills, or you do have the ability to come over and print a stub, or you can email that stub. I'll just go ahead and say done, and let's go look for that check. Before we look in the check register, let's go back over to the Vendor Center. I'm going to click on CU Electric, and I want to show you that when you're looking under the Transactions tab, you're going to see the one we just did right here. You can see it's $705. What I want you to notice is this says Bill Payment Check, and what that tells you is that you went in the correct way and you entered a bill and then you paid it through the Pay Bills option. That means that you went from here to here. Something that I see often is if you enter a bill, but yet you go straight over to the right checks or the register to pay that bill, it will leave this open. You want to make sure if you've entered a bill that you go through the Pay Bills option to pay that bill. If you notice, when we're looking in the Vendor Center, this one is dated on 2/8 and it's for $705. Let's go look in the register and see if we can find it. I'm going to click on Home. I'll go back over to the check register, look in the checking, and I'll go to the Go To option at the very top because I want to search for that amount of money. Let's go ahead and look at amount, and I'll put in $705. I'm going to click back in this case so that it will go up, and you can see right there is my payment to CU Electric. You can always in the register double click where it says bill payment right here, and that will take you to that particular payment. That's really all there is to paying bills in QuickBooks. What I want to do now is take you over to the 5th video in section 5, and let's talk a little bit about vendor credits and how you handle those and apply them to bills. Hey there, it's Cindy again. Welcome back. We're working through QuickBooks for Desktop 2023, and we're down to video number 5 in section 5, where I want to talk to you real quick about how to handle vendor credits. Sometimes your vendor will issue you a credit You can go into QuickBooks and apply that credit to any open bills that you might have that are due. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks and I'll show you how to go ahead and apply those credits. Once you receive a credit memo from your vendor, you'll want to go ahead and enter it in QuickBooks and then apply it to an open bill. You may not have one with an open balance. If that's the case, just enter the credit memo anyway. It will sit on the vendor account until you're ready to use it towards a future bill. Let's go ahead and look at our vendor center. I've got it open here on the left. And you can see this vendor CU Electric. We owe them $45. Another way to look at this is if I go back to the home screen and then go back to pay bills, I'll see CU Electric in the list again. And here's where you can see the $45 that we owe. What you want to do is before you start entering that credit memo, look at the original bill because you need some information from it to put on that credit memo. Because I have CU Electric selected, the one I'd like to look at, I can now go down to the option that says Go to Bill and it will open that bill for me. What you want to look at is specifically this area down at the bottom, because when you're creating a credit memo, you want to credit back for the most part the item under the Items tab, or if you're under the Expenses tab and the original bill had an expense account chosen, that's the one you would choose. You want to be able to back out the same amount of money from the original item or expense. You can see here that this was an item called subs and it was electrical under that item called subs. And then you can see the information all the way across. We're going to be looking at items over in section 6. For now, we'll just remember that this is the one that we want to use in the credit memo. Now that I've got that taken care of, I'm going to close this bill and start the credit memo. I'll just go back to the home screen. And you want to use the option that says Enter Bills and change this to say Credit, and you can see that changes the title here. Now just start entering that information. I'm going to put in CU Electric. The class was Remodel. I'll just choose a date for that credit memo. Then I'll put in the reference number. Typically that's on the credit memo. I would like to credit $45. And remember, the original bill was under the Items tab, and it was an item called Subs, and then a sub-item underneath called Electrical. Now I'll just go ahead and put in my quantity as 1. I'll come over to the amount, put $45. When you're working with items, if you change the cost like I just did, it will ask me if I want to do it permanently. I'm just going to cancel that for now because I don't. This is a one-time thing. If you had a job that was referenced, then you'll want to make sure you fill that in. And also make sure that you're using the correct class that was on the original bill. Now that you have all of that set up, you can go ahead and save and close. And now let's go back to Pay Bills. Now I still have it open here. If I didn't, I could go over here to Pay Bills. Here's my CU Electric. I still owe $45. But what I want you to notice this time is now where it says total credits available, there's a $45 credit available. I'll go ahead and click on Set Credits. What QuickBooks will do is if it sees a credit for that vendor that's the exact same amount, then it will automatically check it off. You just want to make sure you have the correct one selected and then click Done. And that will actually, once you click on Pay Selected Bills at the bottom, that'll actually clear it. In this window, I'll just click Done because I'm finished, and let's go check this out. You'll notice that if you go back to your vendor center and you're clicked on CU Electric, notice now you don't owe them anything. And here's the credit that we just did right here. Also, if you went back to the Pay Bills window, you would see that CU Electric, the particular bill that we credited, is not in this list. That's how you know that you've actually applied the credit to that bill.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.